Well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sister Gabby. She's probably just going to say a few words, and then we'll probably go ahead and get started. And then obviously some people may hop on in a few minutes, but they'll just join us as we go. So thanks again for being part of our first virtual retreat. I'm very excited, and I think Sister Gabby has a lot of good, a good session planned for us. So I'm excited. So here is Sister Gabby.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday evening.
Hi,
It's
Sister
great
Gabby.
to see you all. Yeah, it's wonderful to see you all, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I know that it's Friday night, and maybe people were at work today, or they're finishing the work week, but I'm hoping that this can be a time to kind of take a step back and just sort of let ourselves be. Before we get started, I'll just share a little bit about myself. I'm a Marianist sister. So some of you may have known that there are Marianist brothers and priests, because the Society of Mary, that's the sponsor of St. Vincent St. Mary's School now. But there's also Marianist sisters, and I'm one of them. And I live in a community in Dayton, Ohio with other sisters. There's about 6 of us here, but there's about 350 Marianist sisters across the world. So I'm originally from Indianapolis, and I'm at the Marianists at the University of Dayton, where I graduated in 2011. And then I joined the sisters in 2014. And I'm still here, and I'm still in Dayton. My ministry right now is I work at a place called the North American Center for Marianist Studies, which we shorten to NACMS because it's a very long title.
Sure.
And what we do is we create publications, resources, and programs for people about the Marianist charism and our Marianist history. So part of my job is teaching about the founders and doing some writing about the Marianist founders. And that's some of what we're going to do tonight. That being said, this is a retreat. It's not a workshop. So there will be time for quiet, time for prayer, time for small group sharing. So hopefully you all can kind of let yourselves be in the moment for that. Before we get started, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start with prayer, but before we start with prayer, I find it helpful when I talk to groups. Some of you might be very familiar with Zoom. Some of you maybe less so. So I find it helpful to share some. Do you all see something that says Zoom etiquette tips?
Yes, I do.
Great. I wanted to make sure I was sharing the right screen. So I find it helpful to share just some tips for Zoom before we get started. I went to a presentation back in September. I went to a workshop and they started with this, and I was like, I'm going to steal this and do this too. So shout out to Sister Emily Tukolsky, who's a sister of Providence, who gave me this idea. So the first thing that I would ask is that when you're not speaking and during the presentation, if you could keep yourself muted. Even if it's quiet around you, I am often amazed at just how much noise paper makes. If it's right by your microphone, it makes a lot of noise, and that can be kind of distracting for other people. So that would be very much appreciated. And this shows you exactly where you can find the mute button. If you're on an iPad or a phone, it might look a little bit different, but the mute unmute icon will look the same. If there's a point where your movement might be distracting to people, or if you just especially during the presentation, if you just would rather be off camera, feel free to turn off your video. And you can do that down again at the bottom right, bottom left next to the mute button. You can just stop video and that turns off your video. And then lastly, there will be a few times when we'll use the chat feature in Zoom. And this is where you can find it. So down at the bottom, where it says chat, you just click on that and you can chat to the whole group. Again, if you're on a phone or an iPad, it might look a little bit different, but the icon looks the same. So you can kind of explore a little bit to figure that out. Okay, so now that's it. So we're on the same page with that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare. So our tonight, let me get myself situated here. One moment, please. There we go. So as I mentioned tonight, our main theme that we'll be talking about is the Marianist founders and Mary. And we'll say more about that. But first, like with every good retreat, we'll begin with some prayer. And we'll start our prayer with a song. So let's just take a moment and settle ourselves. Take a couple of good deep breaths, just being here in this moment.
Son,
as we this evening recall the witness of the Marianist founders, it was very appropriate that the first reading for today's liturgy is this part of this reading from the letter to the Hebrews. The Lord has said, I will never forsake you or abandon you. Thus we may say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, and I will not be afraid. What can anyone do to me? Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The word of the Lord. I realize that many of us are joining this call, this Zoom meeting from many different places. And even though we're coming from all over the country, we are still joined together. And so this is just a way to share where we're coming from. So what you do is it's very simple. You can, on your computer, if you want, you can go to www.menti.com and type this code, or you can use the camera on your phone and hold it up to the QR code square. And this is what will pop up on your phone or on your computer. And so what you'll do is you'll share where you're joining us from. So in the first box, the city, the second box, the state. And when we're all finished, this will create a really nice word cloud. So let's just take a few minutes for that.
All right. I'm from Akron, Ohio. I can't do that.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm from close to Akron, Ohio, too.
I'm from Akron, Ohio, too.
I'm from Copley. She's Akron.
See a lot of Ohio, but there's a Florida, Wisconsin, and then as many others have shared, Akron. Many different places in Ohio. So let us just take a moment and hold each other in prayer from all the places where we are joining from, recognizing that the dual gifts of the fact that it's unfortunate we can't be in person, but because we're not in person, so many others are able to participate. And so we give thanks for that. So let us continue with our prayer. So we pray, O God, everything that exists originated in those creative words you spoke at the beginning of time. Let there be light. To renew creation and our relationships with you and one another, your word became flesh and lived among us through Mary's openness. We ask for that same receptivity this evening as we remember the lives of our Marianist founders and how they responded in faith to the challenges before them. Inspire us and bless us with their courage and generosity, so we too may faithfully shine as your light for our world. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so before we really get into the meat of the presentation this evening, what I wanted to do is just to give you an overview of our evening together. And I have 3 real goals. In my conversation with Michelle and some others on the team who were planning putting this together, they mentioned that obviously St. Vincent St. Mary has been a Marianist school for only a few years. And then many of you as alumni, either of St. Vincent or St. Mary, or when the schools joined, probably are not familiar with the Marianists. We're not like the Franciscans or the Jesuits. We're not a huge order like that. I had never heard of the Marianists before I went to the University of Dayton. And so they shared with me that it would be helpful to give you just a little overview of who the Marianist founders are. And then why did they create a religious family, our congregation, dedicated to Mary? And then I also think it's important to look at what we can learn for them today. So as I mentioned before, this is a retreat. It's not a workshop. So there is a presentation, but there will be time for prayer and for sharing. So my hope is that you can really get to know these people and understand their witness and hopefully find them to be inspiring. Because I'm very blessed. I get to talk about them all the time and share with other people about them. So I feel very fortunate to be able to introduce them to you all tonight. So we'll begin our family story. And I say our family story because we talk about the Marianists as being a family, the family of Mary or the Marianist family. So this is like our family history. This is the story of how we came together, how we came to be. Now, what I'm going to give you, I'm not going to go in a lot of detail. I'm going to give you just an overview of the story of how we came together. So we'll start this story with Father Chaminade, who maybe you've heard of before, since the Marianists came about. So Father Chaminade, he was from a town outside of Bordeaux called Périgueux. And I'm zooming out on my map here just because I think it's helpful for you to see. So this is Périgueux, this little star, and you can see how far away it is from Paris. So in the southwest of France. And It's a beautiful town. I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures. There's a lot of tourists who go there. They've got like bed and breakfasts and that kind of thing. He was born into a large family. He was the youngest of 6 children, and his family they were very religious, very dedicated to God. From an early age, Father Chaminade had a deep love of God and devotion to Mary. He was a very religious child. And many people trace his Marian devotion, one, to the influence his mother had on him, because she also loved Mary, but also an incident that happened when he was 12 years old. So when Chaminade was 12, he and some of his friends were playing in a quarry, which doesn't seem like a very good idea, but I guess their parents weren't around to tell them not to do that. So he was playing in a quarry and he fell and he hurt his leg. For most 12-year-old boys, they'll be fine and everything, but several weeks later, his leg had still not healed. So he and his family, they were starting to get concerned, and his older brother, who was a Jesuit, told William Joseph Chaminade, told William to pray to Mary because maybe she'll heal him. So he did that. He prayed to Mary and asked for her intercession that his leg might be healed. And sure enough, it was. So he was so overjoyed and so in awe of Mary that he said, I have to make a pilgrimage of thanksgiving. I have to make a pilgrimage. So he walked, 12 years old, he walked 45 miles away from town to a Marian shrine called Our Lady of Verdelais. And this is, you can visit it today. This is the Mary that's there in that shrine. So he walked over 45 miles to the shrine that was a common pilgrimage site to give thanks to God and to give thanks to Mary for her intercession. So I think we can tell from this that he had a very special relationship with Mary and trusted in her protection. So as he grew older, as many religious young men at the time did, he went to seminary. And that was natural too, because he had 3 of his other brothers also became priests. So he was the 4th priest in the family. And after he was ordained, he went back to that same seminary and he became a teacher. Life was good. The seminary was well known because Chaminade and his 2 brothers worked there. They made it successful. Things were normal, not very eventful, but it was a good life. All of this would change almost overnight. 1789 marked the year that began the French Revolution. And I don't know how much you all know about the French Revolution. I somehow never took a European history class. I don't know how that happened. I took American history twice. So I was not at all familiar with the French Revolution or interested in it for that matter until I became a Marianist. So I've done a lot of catching up on that. But Christine, she's been taking the Marianist history class, Christine Spinner, so she can tell you a lot about the French Revolution now too. But this was the French Revolution happened, 1789, and it changed everything. When it started out, it looked very promising, similar to the American Revolution, and which was one of the, impetuses of the French Revolution. The French people looked at the Americans and were like, why can't we do that? So like the American Revolution, people were hoping for more democratic governance, more equality in society, because there was a big gap between the clergy and the nobles and the common people. So they wanted more equality. And they wanted some financial reforms that would ease the suffering of the poor. So when it started out, it was very promising and exciting, but this period of rapid change gave way to chaos. And to give you a sense of how chaotic it was, in a period of 4 years, France went from having a king with total power to a constitutional monarchy where there was a legislative body and a king with limited power, to no king because they killed him, and a completely representative government in 4 years. It's unimaginable. So as the chaos kind of began, some of the leaders of the new government in France, they took this as an opportunity to make reforms to the Catholic Church. Some of these reforms were good, but many of them were met with resistance and anger by the clergy, the laity, and eventually the Pope himself. All of this tension came to a head when the government required that all clergy in France must declare an oath to the Constitution. And if they didn't make that oath, they wouldn't have a parish, and life would be very difficult for them. So here's Father Chaminade. He had only been a priest for about 5 years. Now he has to decide, what am I going to do? Do I take the oath? Do I not take the oath and accept the consequences? And I want you to know that about half of all priests in France did take the oath. I mean, they were split almost down the middle. So after a lot of prayer and discernment, Father Chaminade decided, I can't take the oath. I just can't do it. And he paid a price for that. So it's at this point, around 1792, that the church began being persecuted outright. Priests like Father Chaminade, who didn't take the oath, were imprisoned and executed. Nuns and monks were forced to leave their monasteries, and if they didn't, they would also be imprisoned and killed by the guillotine. This is where the guillotine was invented, was for the French Revolution, so that they could execute many more people. It's difficult to overstate just how violent and chaotic this time was. It was a bloodbath that Europe hadn't seen in centuries. It was a terrible thing to live through. So Father Chaminade, as he's seeing the violence unfolding, knowing that he was really in danger, he realized that if he wanted to continue ministering as a priest, he would need to move to a bigger city where he could hide. So it's at this point he went to Bordeaux, which was a very big city. It was the third biggest city in France. He joined a network of priests and lay people who formed an underground church. There's a lot of great stories from this time period because Chaminade was in hiding, but he kept ministering. So he would dress in disguises, visited people in the night to give them sacraments, having secret masses in people's homes. There's one story, I have a picture here of a barrel, because one very famous story is that the police came to his house thinking that they'd heard a rumor that he was there and they wanted to arrest him. And his housekeeper was like, no, he's not here. He hasn't been here for ages. Well, Father Chaminade heard they were coming and he was talking to the housekeeper and she hid him under a barrel. And so the policemen who came, they were like, okay. And so then they sat down by the barrel and had a glass of wine with the housekeeper with Father Chaminade in the barrel. I mean, he had so many close calls during this time of almost getting caught. So there's a lot of great stories from this time period. But again, I can't overstate, if he had been caught, he would have been killed. And one of his best friends, who was a priest, was killed in Bordeaux at this time. So he did this for 2 years. He spent 2 years in hiding, evading arrest. And after 2 years, he was able to come out of hiding. And it's at this point that he met a lay woman named Marie-Thérèse de la Marousse. Marie-Thérèse had taken a very active role in the underground church as a lay woman, as many other lay women did. They weren't as suspicious as the men were. So she taught people the catechism, she held prayer services, she gave people spiritual counsel. She even several times dressed up as a cleaning woman to kind of work her way into the town hall to secretly look at the list of who were the next people to get arrested so that she could go and warn them to hide before they could be arrested and killed. Again, she definitely would have been executed if she had been caught. So the courageous faith and that you see at this time is just incredible. But after a couple of years, the government changed again, and Father Chaminade couldn't go back into hiding. He was in hiding, he came out, he couldn't go back into hiding. So he had to leave the country. And so he went to Spain. And he was exiled for 3 years in a Spanish town called Zaragoza, which is somewhat close to the border with France. Zaragoza was known then and is still known now as a city with a humongous basilica dedicated to Our Lady of the Pillar. And this is Our Lady of the Pillar. She's actually like, the statue is only about this tall. So she's kind of little, but she has this huge basilica. And there's a great story for another time about how the basilica came to be. But one of the reasons Father Chaminade went there is because it was a city devoted to Mary. So for 3 years, Father Chaminade was in Zaragoza waiting until the day he could return to France. There wasn't a lot for him to do there. So he spent most of his time praying. He prayed and he planned for what he would do when he could return to France. So this is a really important period, a really important part of the Marianist story, because according to tradition, this is where Father Chaminade received an inspiration from Mary. And this inspiration was to return to France and build communities of lay people dedicated to Our Lady, who would rebuild the church from the ground up. There was no church in France anymore. Churches were closed. So these communities would rebuild the church. They would be like the Christians of the early church who built something from nothing. Their witness of discipleship, of faith and charity would be so strong, they would grow by attraction. This vision, it was like they would be shining lights or a spectacle of saints, as Father Chaminade said, that would be contagious. People would see that and would be attracted to that. That was the vision. And Father Chaminade was very clear about this vision. So in 1800, when he was finally able to return to France, he goes back to Bordeaux. And within 3 weeks, like he just got back to Bordeaux, within 3 weeks, he finds a group of young men and they start meeting. And that was the first people in the sodality. And this community was called the Sodality of Bordeaux. So when I say sodality, basically it's community. It's a community. That was the word that they used. And this sodality, it was to be a community of Christians dedicated to Mary. It was implementing that vision that he received. What's notable about the sodality is that it was comprised of rich and poor and middle class, people from different professions and backgrounds, which was very new. It was a new thing. It was so society was so stratified at that time. It was also men and women. So this is where Father Chaminade returned to his old friend, Marie-Therese, and asked her if she could lead the women's section of the sodality. And she did. She was the leader for the next 30 years, even while she also took over a ministry working with recovering prostitutes. The sodality was a huge success. People were hungering for this. And just like Father Chaminade thought, it grew by attraction. People were drawn to it. So meanwhile, we're getting to the third founder, Mother Adele. So at the same time all of this is happening, there's a young woman named Adele de Batz-de-Tranquillon, and she was fulfilling her own vision of rebuilding the French church. And in this vision, the church was being rebuilt by young women. So Adele was 30 years younger than Father Chaminade and Marie-Therese, but she was no less ambitious. She lived in the country, about 70 miles away from Bordeaux. At the age of 15, this is astounding to me. At the age of 15, she decided to start a faith community for young women. And most of these young women, like Adele, lived sort of dispersed throughout the country and in small towns. And these young women, they wrote letters to each other, and they had a community through letter writing. They prayed for each other, and sometimes they would find opportunities to gather in person for retreats. I feel like it's a model for us at this time in the pandemic when we can't see each other in person, the way that we can still have community even though we're apart. And like the Bordeaux sodality, this association of young women grew rapidly. So this was Adele's way of resurrecting the church. This is, at this point, we see Providence really at work. So several years after Adele started her association, this was around 1809, so 9 years after the Bordeaux sodality started, her mother went to visit someone at a nearby hospital, a friend of hers. And while her mother was in the waiting room, she noticed a man sitting next to her, and she struck up a conversation with him. And as many proud mothers do, she started talking to him about her daughter, Adele. And she was telling him about the community she started and all this kind of stuff, her vision for how to kind of build the church back up. Well, it turns out this man was a member of the Bordeaux sodality. And he was so struck by how similar Adele's vision was to Father Chaminade's. So he gave Chaminade's contact information to Adele's mother, and he urged her to tell Adele that she had to write to Father Chaminade. And she did. Right away, Adele wrote to Father Chaminade, and they began a correspondence through letters that lasted for many years. And within a year or two, Adele's association, the young women who wrote letters to each other, they became part of the Bordeaux sodality, sort of a different section of the sodality. So this is where we see the three of them come together and the visions sort of colliding and becoming cohesive. So after years of growth of the Bordeaux sodality and the association, Adele and some of her friends, they felt a strong desire to become religious sisters. And they wondered if they could create a new religious order, one that was dedicated to Mary, living out that same vision that was lived by the Bordeaux sodality. So she and Chaminade began talking about this idea. And then after talking about this idea, they began planning to make this idea a reality. And so in 1816, Adele, with Chaminade's help and with some guidance from Marie Therese, began the Marianist Sisters, the Daughters of Mary, which is my congregation. What's so remarkable about this is all of the planning for this foundation of the sisters happened through letter writing, entirely through letter writing. Adele and Chaminade didn't meet in person until after the Marianist Sisters started. I know for me, I sometimes want to make excuses not to do something because it seems like too difficult, or, you know, right now with the pandemic and not being able to travel, to do things. And I see this and I'm like, there's no excuse that, like, if you set your mind to it, it can happen. So they start the Daughters of Mary. 1 year later, a group of men approached Father Chaminade and told him that they also wanted to start a new religious congregation. And so in 1817, they started the Society of Mary, which is the Marianist brothers and priests. Both the Daughters of Mary and the Society of Mary were created to support the sodality, to live out Chaminade and Adele's vision for rebuilding the church under the mantle of Mary. And one of the major ways that they started to do that was by starting schools. They saw schools as a way to form children in the faith. And their thinking was that by forming the children in the faith, they would go home and influence their parents and their faith as well. Not to mention that education in schools would enhance the sodality. It would be like an apostolic extension of the work of the sodality. And over 200 years later, the Marianist family is still doing that. We still have a lot of schools. We have lay Marianist communities. We have sisters, we have brothers and priests, all because these three people had a dream, a vision, and a faith, a faith life that couldn't be crushed by the circumstances they lived in. And they made that a reality. So that's the Marianist story. That's our family history. But there's a couple more things that I'd like to reflect on, particularly the question, why Mary? Why was Mary so important to the founders that they created a religious family dedicated to her? Tomorrow morning, we're going to do a lot more exploration of Mary and the Marianists' spirituality, really. But to answer this question specifically, the founders believed that Mary has an incredibly important role to play in our own formation as Christians. And that role is helping form us into Christ. So if you think about Mary, obviously she was Jesus's mother. But if you think about like your relationship with your own mother, it's not like your mom gives birth to you and then it's like, okay, poof, like you're done, you're ready to go out in the world. Mary gave birth to Jesus. She nurtured him. She taught him how to pray. She nursed him. She helped him become the man that he became. She formed him into the Christ. So doesn't she also have a role to play in helping form us into Christ? That was the thinking of the founders. I also think for the founders that she was a great source of consolation. So I mentioned earlier that Father Chaminade used the early church as a model for the sodality, of how to build something, how to build the church up. Well, Mary has been an important figure from the very beginning of the church. The earliest Christians, and we can see this in the Gospels, express devotion and admiration for Mary. But why? Well, I think that it was probably a really scary thing to build a church after Christ ascended. Jesus was not physically present anymore. And so the disciples were like, okay, how are we going to do this? That's a huge task. But Mary was there. We know she was there. We know she was at Pentecost when the Spirit came to the apostles. And I think Mary gave the early Christians a lot of consolation. And that consoling presence, I think, was very influential for the founders as they encountered all the obstacles that they did. They really looked to her for that consolation. And perhaps most importantly, and maybe most obviously, Mary is an exemplary model of faith, hope, and love. These are the virtues that guide Christian living, especially in the most difficult times. She had faith that God had not abandoned her. She had hope that God would bring fruit from her efforts. And she had a great love for God. And I think the founders looked at that and said, we must also have a love of those who persecute us. So the founders looked to her as a guide, helping them to live and understand the virtues more deeply. So to close this portion, I just want to say a little bit from my reflection of what we can learn from the founders today. It may have become a cliche to say this, but I don't think it's any less true. We're living through some very difficult times. We're experiencing a pandemic, social unrest, political polarization, economic instability, the list goes on. In light of these challenges, I think the Marianist founders are tremendous examples of what it means to live out faith in the most difficult circumstances. Time and again, obstacle after obstacle, they never gave up their ministry, even when it could have cost them their lives. They lived out the call of a missionary, and they talked about our call to be missionaries, to serve in any place, regardless of circumstances, bringing God's love to all those in need. What they say especially is that we're to be missionaries of Mary by giving birth to Christ in our world today. And that's a really powerful call. The last thing that I think they show us, and I think this is something that the Marianist family witnesses to a lot, is the necessity of community. The revolution destroyed community when it tore apart the church. Chaminade and Adele understood how important community was for rebuilding the church, for sustaining faith. And I think this is a really key lesson for our time now, for many reasons, because of how individualistic our society is, but looking at COVID, because of the physical distancing that's required, I think it's reminding us of how much we need community. So for me in my life and in my faith, and especially this year and all of the challenges it's brought, they have been such guiding lights for me. And I hope that they might be that for you too. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some time for quiet reflection. Now, if we were in person, I would have this printed out for you and to hand out, and you could take that, but we're not in person. So I am going to put this link in the chat. You can also go to the tiny URL if you want. But this is a link to a document that you'll be able to view. If you can't view it, please let me know. But if you click on the link, it'll go to a document that has reflection questions and quotes from the founders. We're going to spend about 20 minutes for this time for reflection. I will play some reflective music, but feel free to turn off your sound if you don't want to hear the music. But I find that sometimes it's helpful for people. If you want to step away from the computer and go to the other room, feel free to do that, but don't log out of Zoom. You can just stay in Zoom. I know that many of you received sort of like retreat packets that you got a journal, like maybe you could use that to jot down your reflections. And then I just encourage you to put aside other distractions. This is time for you and God. So are there any questions about that? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I don't know how to get to the document.
Okay. So can you open the chat? Did you see the chat?
In the chat, yep. Okay. The
Can
chat.
you click on the link
Oh, there
that
it
I
is.
sent? Yeah,
Now I lost you.
that's okay. I'm still here. Don't worry.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Okay, great. So when we'll come back after about 20 minutes, we'll split up into small groups for some sharing. Okay. All right. So happy reflecting, and I hope you have a blessed time. We'll just have one more minute just to finish up your reflections. Okay, so I invite you to come back, and if you could turn your videos back on as we prepare for the next part. So I hope that reading the founder's words was helpful. I think that you get to know them a little bit better when you read them in their own words, and I think those are some of my favorite quotes by them that I gave you. So hopefully some of them struck you. So what we're going to do now is we are going to split into breakout rooms. If you've never done breakout rooms on Zoom, don't worry, it's not too difficult. Michelle is going to assign you to different groups. And basically when she opens the breakout rooms, you'll get a little window that pops up on your screen. And all you have to do is click join breakout room and it'll automatically put you there. And then when we're finished with our time, we'll yank you back. We'll close the rooms and we'll yank you back. So doing a retreat on Zoom is actually somewhat beneficial because when I've led retreats in person, it's often a real slog to get people to come back from their groups. Yeah, so this one you've got no choice. We're gonna yank you back. So you have to finish your discussions. So in your small groups, on that same form that I gave you, just gave you some guidelines. I encourage you just to start by introducing yourselves and where you're from, why you came on the retreat, and probably your graduation year too, if you're an alumni. And then just sharing on what this time was for you. How, if a quote struck you or something from the presentation struck you. So it's pretty simple. And again, we'll spend about 20 minutes doing that. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, you ready me to click the button?
Yeah, I think so. So like I said,
Okay.
when the window pops up, you just click join breakout room.
Okay, here we go.
Great. Hello. Have you been able, did you see the window that popped up? Did you all see the window that popped up for the breakout rooms?
I'm not able to get out of my document back into the Zoom meeting.
Okay. I see that you're on your computer too.
Yeah, I tried to get back on.
Okay.
We having the same trouble, Tom?
Okay. So, so you joined on your phone.
Yep, that's a problem.
It's the sound from your computer.
Right.
Okay. Let me see. Let me see what I can do. If you turn the sound off on your computer, I can help you get back. I don't know if you're using a PC, like just a regular Windows computer. Because one thing you could do is you could go back to your email and try to sign into Zoom again from your email.
See, I can't even close my computer at all to get to my Gmail.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can put you from your phone into a group. So hold on one moment.
I'll just join through my husband's.
Oh, okay. That'll work. That'll work. Great. Thank you. I'm sorry you had such difficulty.
Sister Gabby, our kids went to, well, our son went to Dayton, and so did his wife. So, like the time that you went.
Did you say you graduated in 2011 there?
I did.
Yeah, they same year.
Yeah.
Oh, what's their names?
Bowen and Leslie.
Yeah.
We did text him. I won't tell you the response, but it had something to do with the ghetto. They didn't see you in the ghetto. So
That's funny. Yeah, no. I didn't.
That doesn't mean anything.
they're good kids.
Yeah. But I might have had classes with them. I don't know. That's really interesting. Yeah, it's a great place.
She was an education major, and then he was in finance and accounting. So
Okay. Yeah, and I was a religious studies and English major. So I probably wouldn't have, I might have, with her, I might have had, I had some classes with education majors, but
probably did, yeah.
Not as much the business school. Yeah, it's a great place. I'm very fortunate that I am able to work so much still with students and live just down the street. It's almost like I never left sometimes.
Okay, we have to explain the ghetto thing because I don't want that hanging out there.
Oh, yeah.
We'll let you explain that.
Yeah, you explain the ghetto thing.
Yeah. Well, so the University of Dayton bought a while ago, and over the years have acquired more houses in the neighborhood just around the university. And for many years they have called that the ghetto, and I think it was called that because the houses were very
Run down.
Nice. Yeah, they were not very nice. Actually, now they're very nice. They've all been renovated, and so there's been a lot of people don't call it that as much anymore, for other reasons too. But the students live in houses, and it's really wonderful. The juniors and seniors, it's very, very cool, and that's part of that community spirit of the university. Having students hanging out on porches, and then there's also the shadow side of that, which is some of the parties that would happen. But yeah, it's a great place, and changed my life going there. So that's our university plug. There will be another one tomorrow with some alumni. But so we're just going to take a little bit of time just to have some open conversation. So in your small groups, you had a chance to talk a little bit more in depth. And so now this is just maybe just to share what your small group talked about, some of your own insights, reflections, and I'll just kind of open that up. Anybody can just jump in and share about that.
One thing that I appreciated so much was the openness that our group shared with each other, and that it seemed to be so easy to take any of the quotes and apply them to our own lives. And I don't think at all was related to the pandemic. I think it was related to each of our own personal journeys in life, and how rich that is for a community, a sodality, to be able to take this and to make it our own.
Thank you.
Well, I was going to say that in our small group, we a lot of us liked the quote from Mother Adele that was, I just wrote down the first part of it, but it started off with, "We must always place our trust in God." So it was just talking about how, you just have to keep that trust and believe that you're, on the right path, and that, God's watching out for you, and whatever the situation is, he's going to get you through. So I think that was really important. I think it's very timely also, obviously, just with everything going on. I think we always have to keep that in the back of our mind, that even though some things seem a little crazy right now, that God is going to get us through it, and we just have to trust in that. So
I wanted to mention a carryover from last year's retreat, a practice that I started then in And some of you were at that retreat. I started a tea with Mary that the nun that was leading the retreat suggested that. So I made that sort of a regular practice that I do it on the third day of the month regularly, early in the morning, and not necessarily that long, but just think, reflect, meditate, or look at the Bible sometimes. But now it's built in as a regular practice for me. So, you know, now I'm very conscious of it, and I've connected better with Mary.
I didn't bring this up in our talk, but I had like 4 of those quotes, but one was, we must always, sorry, can hardly see, put our trust in God. And basically, I think it said that through him, we can do anything. And I personally have a hard time with that. Just to dealing with certain physical issues. And I think I combat that every day, but I pray a lot over it. And another thing it was, let me see here. I'm so sorry. Our most serious failing would be to despair. And I have to be honest that I went through 2 years of despair. And I truly believe it was my faith, my friends, my family who kept me going. And it was a constant battle every day. And I probably still do battle it a little bit every day, as probably some of us do that have different, maybe physical issues we're dealing with, health issues. And, but I do always turn to God. I do realize though, that in the 2 years that I had such a hard time, I told my priest, I think I am so filled with anger over this doctor that I did not leave any room for Jesus to come in. And I had to work very hard on that. It's what I go to confession for all the time. So I'm trying.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, in terms of physical challenges, Blessed Adele is a great person to pray to about that, because she spent the last really 3 years of her life bedridden because she had tuberculosis. So she fought against that temptation to despair every day in terms of her physical health. So thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
I think in our group, we there was a good variety of quotes that folks picked and reflections that they had. But I think one way to maybe capsulize most of it is that you know, I think it's easy sometimes to when you talk about the Marianists to focus on Chaminade. And I guess in one way, rightfully so, but it is the Society of Mary. And Mary sometimes seems to get forgotten in some of the discussions. And even when you go around to some of the Marianist schools, you see an awful lot about Chaminade, but sometimes some of the schools don't have very much about Mary. And I think it's really important that in the Society of Mary that we elevate her. And I mean, Chaminade was smart enough to put the sisters and the sodalities out front of the priests and the brothers, and put them first. So I think that's probably the least we can do in many ways.
I find it compelling to recognize the fact that the whole development of this community began with the lay people. Father Chaminade gathered the lay people of France to rebuild the church. He did not gather priests, and he did not gather nuns and brothers. He gathered the lay people who then rebuilt the church. And from the laity then came ordination and vows, and the vowed life came from within that sodality community. I find that very compelling.
That's a good observation.
Yeah.
And very, very unusual in the history of the church. If you look at religious families, it's normally the male branch, the brothers and priests, and then sisters, and then laity.
Yeah.
So that's totally reversed. It's very unusual.
Yeah. And for me, that is so compelling. As a lay person, married 53 years, and it's just a very, very compelling aspect of the Marianists that really draws me in.
There's a quote that what some of you just said that reminds me that our sodality, our small faith community in the Marianist tradition, is a society of fervent Christians that shines a light. And when Christians form into a sodality, they shine light. So that's a very good comment for me and us to remember, because our small group is housed in a parish in East Cleveland, and we don't get out of it much, but some of the members are faithful parishioners at St. Aloysius Parish, and we also, through our Zoom meetings of the last 6 months, I think we find that Tony and I talk about this, that there is spreading that happens because of our discussions in the group. We take it out.
Last week at our community meeting, we had the privilege of meeting with a group from Kansas.
Oh.
Similar, no Marianist, no vowed Marianist in Kansas, but they started a small faith community, and we met with them, and they shared a lot about their group and how they meet and what they do. But you just reach outside yourself, and it was a wonderful experience, expression.
Any last thoughts before we close in prayer?
I do have, I'm going to go to a quote. It says, oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Receive now, oh my God, an offering that I make to you of myself. And I'm going to ask all of you, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, and I know Denise and Jim know him too, but he had a liver transplant on Monday. And his name's Father Louis Thomas. And if you would just please pray for him and for his donor, Anna Clark, I would really appreciate that. This whole retreat, I'm offering up for his healing and for her healing. So if you could just remember Father Louis Thomas. Did I say Clark? Father Louis Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Father Louis, I don't know if you know this, but Father Louis is the one who came to do the blessing of our new grotto that is down.
Oh,
yeah, he did. Yeah. So
he is he's hysterical.
great.
I love
man.
him.
Really great man. Yeah. He is.
If it's not too much, I also have a prayer intention. My niece just lost their baby. She was 21 weeks pregnant, and he wasn't strong enough to survive. So they named him Reed Patrick. And so if you could pray for Tara and her husband, Todd, and my brother and his wife, the whole family are grieving. They're grieving. she's also got, mother also has COVID. So they don't know whether that caused it or what, but for the Taylor family. Thank you.
You all are so good. You're way ahead of me. We'll have more intentions for prayer. So thank you so much for sharing those intentions, and let's certainly keep those in prayer. And thank you for all of your sharings. It's very enriching for me to hear your reflections related to these three people who I love so much. And as Bill said, talking about Mary, tomorrow is all about Mary. So if you haven't, we've gotten like just a little taste of Mary for the Marianists, and tomorrow we'll get the whole meal. So I just encourage you as you go throughout the rest of your night, maybe to reflect on, again, that question that was given and for small group discussion, and for your reflection, who is Mary to you? I realize that not everybody has a relationship with Mary, and that's okay. Maybe not everybody understands why Mary is important, and that's okay. And we can talk about that tomorrow. And who is Mary to the Marianists too? How do we talk about Mary? And so all of that we will talk about tomorrow. So for our closing prayer, I want to show you just a brief musical clip from a musical that took place at the University of Dayton in 2018. So there's a lay Marianist in Dayton named Nick Cardellino, who works in campus ministry at UD and is very talented musically. So he and a couple others wrote an entire musical about the foundation of the Marianists. Wow. So Adele and Marie-Therese and Father Chaminade are the main characters. And I'm going to just play a brief clip from this for you of the song where the three of them come together as they begin the really starting the Marianist project. So it's just a few minutes long, and I have some subtitles too, so you can listen. So I should invite you to draw in and let yourself kind of be immersed in the spirit of the founders. Let me make sure I also shared my sound. Yes, here we go.
Divine, may you find that their love tried to kill me and exile me, trying to break my soul. But my God will be by my side here in jail, where he's still in control. I am like shook, too much. Oh my God, haven't we endured enough? Rocks may much, too much. At the end, I feel like giving up. But Jesus offered his life for the lost. I rise up, I can never ever do. I am like shook, that's all. That's
So now I invite you to offer any prayers of intention that you might have.
Pierre, what are you doing here?
Sorry, I don't know what that was.
As I start treatment again next week, prayers for me and for anybody else struggling through physical, mental, emotional, spiritual struggles that, like the brook, we can overcome.
I'd like to pray for my sister. She's been battling esophageal cancer for a couple months now, and it's been pretty tough on her. And but she got through chemo and radiation this week, and she's going to have a surgery in March. But she's nervous about a feeding tube because she's lost a lot of weight, and she just needs prayers for courage to accept that and surrender to our Blessed Mother, surrender to our Lord. And I just ask that you pray for her.
What's her name?
What's her first name?
Maureen Ashdown.
Okay, thank you.
For my nephew Lucas, who will be 2 next month, he's also going to have a pretty major surgery for being a 2-year-old. So
for my niece who's expecting her first child next month, that these last 4 or 5 weeks go smoothly for her and she remains healthy and she delivers a healthy baby. And in Thanksgiving for all of you who have made this retreat very special and meaningful, I thank you.
I second that, Carla. Carla, what's your niece's name?
Erin.
Oh,
Erin.
okay. Yay, Erin.
Yeah.
I pray for the students, faculty, staff, administration, for our board, for all the alumni, for all the parents, that they again be witness to Mary's love and can share it with the greater Akron community and beyond.
Besides me asking you to pray for Father Lou and Anna Clark, my middle daughter had a miscarriage, and it was very difficult for her.
Yeah,
and her name's Lauren. So if you could just please remember her in your prayers. They're trying to have another child, so hopefully with God's help, all will go well. I have another friend, Terry, who is has serious heart issues. In fact, in about a month, he'll be put in the hospital and they're not 100% sure what they can do. But, you know, a miracle can happen. So his name is Terry.
I'd like to pray for our country, that we find our way out of the darkness of many types, and that the country finds its way back to Jesus and Mary.
Tony and I ask your prayers for our daughter, Katie. She will be 41 next month, and she is expecting her first child at the end of May.
Oh, God bless.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask for some prayers for a few of our students at St. Vincent St. Mary. They lost a friend who went to Copley High School this week. They worked with him and were friends with him, and they're very much struggling. So if we could keep them and this boy's family and friends in our prayers.
Do you have his name?
Yeah, his name was Nathan.
Nathan Cotter.
I taught in Copley.
Did you?
Mhm. Yeah. We've been praying for him, for, I should say, his family and the children.
A number of his friends have been coming to me there. So, yeah.
Pray more for them.
Yeah.
So let us hold these intentions and those that are unspoken as we pray this prayer. And I invite you to all mute yourselves and pray it with me, because if everybody prays it unmuted at the same time, it's a little bit chaotic. But we hold these intentions, praying through the intercession of Mary and our founders as we pray. Almighty God, you inspired Blessed Chaminade and Blessed Adele with Venerable Marie Therese to found a family especially dedicated to Mary. We ask you to grant us through their intercession the grace of fidelity to their spirit and vision. Strengthen our alliance with Mary, our Mother, so that we might be formed into the image of her Son. Grant us a clear vision of the needs of the Church in our world, and give us the courage to respond in faith. Raise up new vocations in the Marianist family, so that our work under the leadership of Mary may continue to bring about the reign of God. We ask this through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Okay, well, thank you all. Have a great night. I hope to see many of you tomorrow morning at 9:30. And there's a different Zoom link, but you can go to the same email, but there's a different Zoom link for that.
Okay.
So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll try to send out, I'm gonna right now send an email to everybody with the link for tomorrow, just so you have it separately. Okay, so look for that in your email. Okay, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you all.
Great seeing all of you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.